Hi, I'm Jenny Lynch, and this is the Creative Science for Kids podcast.
Hi, I'm Matilda, and today's show is all about liquid nitrogen.
It's time to go sub-zero with fascinating fast facts about liquid nitrogen, a deep dive into how people use liquid nitrogen, a question about the safety of liquid nitrogen, some ideas about how cryogenic liquids are made, and a chilling experiment for you to try yourself at home. It's time for some serious brain freeze because here come 5 fun and fascinating fast facts about liquid nitrogen.
Fact number 1. Nitrogen gas makes up most of the Earth's atmosphere.
About 78% of the air we breathe is nitrogen gas. You can't see nitrogen gas, it doesn't have a smell, and as long as you have enough oxygen to breathe, nitrogen gas won't hurt you at all.
Fact number 2. If you make nitrogen gas cold enough, it will turn into liquid nitrogen.
Liquid nitrogen is made from nitrogen gas in the air. The air is squashed and cooled until the nitrogen gas turns into liquid nitrogen. Liquid nitrogen is a clear liquid, so it looks a lot like water, but it is much colder than water.
Fact number 3. Liquid nitrogen is extremely cold. The temperature of liquid nitrogen is minus 196 degrees Celsius.
Water is a liquid at room temperature, but nitrogen gas has to be cooled to minus 196 degrees Celsius for it to turn into liquid nitrogen. Minus 196 degrees Celsius is the boiling point of nitrogen, so as soon as it is heated above that temperature, it will boil and turn into nitrogen gas.
Fact number 4. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, which is very hot. Liquid nitrogen boils at minus 196 degrees Celsius, which is extremely cold.
Different materials boil at different temperatures. In liquid water, there are forces of attraction between the water molecules called hydrogen bonds, and it takes quite a lot of heat energy to break the hydrogen bonds to turn liquid water into a gas. In liquid nitrogen, the bonds between the nitrogen atoms are much weaker, so it takes a lot less heat energy for nitrogen to change from a liquid to a gas.
Fact number 5. Liquid nitrogen can be used to make things very cold, very quickly.
When two objects touch each other, heat will flow from the warmer object to the colder object. If a warm object is placed in liquid nitrogen, heat energy moves from the warm object to the liquid nitrogen, causing the liquid nitrogen to boil. The warm object cools down and will eventually become as cold as the liquid nitrogen.
Let's take a deep dive into some of the uses of liquid nitrogen.
If you've ever seen a spectacular science show, like the Creative Science Show for example, you might have seen science demonstrations using liquid nitrogen, like snap freezing lettuce or a banana, billowing white clouds of water vapor, and explosive experiments using expanding nitrogen gas. Liquid nitrogen is excellent for demonstrating the states of matter. You can see liquid nitrogen boiling to make nitrogen gas, and if the gas is used to inflate a balloon, you can see the huge volume of nitrogen gas that can be produced by a fairly small amount of liquid nitrogen.
In the food industry, liquid nitrogen is used to snap freeze fresh fruits and vegetables and seafood. Freezing food quickly helps to keep the flavor and texture of the food, and keeping it frozen allows food to be stored for a long time.
In scientific research, liquid nitrogen can be used in experiments on superconductors and other materials that have interesting properties at very low temperatures. It's also used in biology to store cells from living things. Careful preparation and freezing of the cells allows them to be stored in liquid nitrogen for a really long time. Liquid nitrogen is used by doctors to treat some types of skin cancer by freezing the cancer cells and leaving behind the healthy tissue. It's also used for freezing warts or for storing important tissue samples that are used for medical research and to help people with having children. Plumbers sometimes use liquid nitrogen to freeze the water inside pipes. This stops the water flowing in the pipe while repairs are made.
Now it's time for a question. How dangerous is liquid nitrogen?
Liquid nitrogen can be dangerous to humans in 2 main ways. Firstly, liquid nitrogen is so cold that it can freeze skin and other tissue if a person touches liquid nitrogen. Secondly, the nitrogen gas made by liquid nitrogen can lead to death if there isn't enough oxygen gas to breathe.
Have you ever had a burn from touching something hot? Nerves in your skin respond to extreme heat to cause the pain sensation, and the heat can damage the skin.
Liquid nitrogen can cause burns too, but they're called cryogenic burns or cold burns. Like with a heat burn, a burn from liquid nitrogen causes damage to the skin. Wearing safety equipment makes it much safer to handle liquid nitrogen. Long gloves are worn to protect the hands, and long pants and closed shoes must be worn to protect the legs and feet.
A cryogenic burn to the eyes can cause serious eye damage and even loss of sight, so it is very important to wear safety goggles or a face shield while using liquid nitrogen.
When liquid nitrogen boils, it produces a huge volume of nitrogen gas. Although air is about 78% nitrogen gas, we need to have enough oxygen in the air to keep us alive. If too much nitrogen gas is added to the air we're breathing, there will not be enough oxygen, and this is extremely dangerous. To keep people safe when using liquid nitrogen, there must be plenty of fresh air to provide enough oxygen to breathe. For example, it's very dangerous for a person to carry liquid nitrogen in a small space like a lift. If the lift were to break down, the person would be trapped in a small space with a limited amount of air, and the level of oxygen gas in the air could drop to dangerously low levels as the liquid nitrogen turns into nitrogen gas. Liquid nitrogen cannot be carried in an ordinary car and has to be transported in specially designed containers. It can be carried in an open trailer, a truck, or a ute where it's separated from the driver and passengers. While all of this makes liquid nitrogen sound a little bit scary, it can be very safe to use for people who are specially trained to follow the correct safety procedures.
Liquid nitrogen has been used in scientific research since the 1880s, and it is called a cryogenic liquid. Other cryogenic liquids are liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen, and liquid helium.
The coldest day on Earth was about minus 90 degrees Celsius, which was recorded in Antarctica. At this temperature, nitrogen is a gas. To make liquid nitrogen, scientists had to invent ways of cooling nitrogen gas below the boiling point of minus 196 degrees Celsius. One way of cooling a gas is to make it expand very quickly. This is how most liquid nitrogen is made today. Air is put under lots of pressure and then allowed to expand quickly. As the gases in the air expand, they cool down. Before nitrogen gas is turned into liquid nitrogen, other gases in the air such as water vapor and carbon dioxide gas are removed from the air. This leaves oxygen gas and nitrogen gas, which are then separated in a tall tower before the oxygen gas is turned into liquid oxygen and the nitrogen gas is turned into liquid nitrogen. Liquid oxygen has a temperature of minus 183 degrees Celsius, which is not quite as cold as liquid nitrogen, and it has some interesting properties. Liquid oxygen has a pale blue color and it is paramagnetic, which means it will be attracted to a magnet. Liquid hydrogen is colder than liquid nitrogen and liquid oxygen, with a temperature of minus 253 degrees Celsius. Liquid hydrogen is used as a fuel for rockets for space travel, and liquid oxygen is used as a source of oxygen for the combustion of the fuel. Even colder than liquid hydrogen is liquid helium, with a temperature of minus 268.93 degrees Celsius. Liquid helium is useful for keeping equipment cool, like MRI machines that are used to make images of the human body. Another very cold substance that's sometimes confused with liquid nitrogen is solid carbon dioxide, which is also called dry ice. The temperature of dry ice is about minus 78 degrees Celsius, and it's often seen surrounded by clouds of white water vapor, similar to the cool clouds of fog around bubbling liquid nitrogen. Liquid nitrogen can freeze living things and cause a lot of damage to their cells.
You can test this out yourself by freezing some lettuce. Make sure you tell an adult what you are doing and ask for their permission first. You'll need 2 fresh lettuce leaves, a fridge and freezer, and a plate.
Place 1 lettuce leaf in the freezer and leave it there for a few hours or overnight. Place the other lettuce leaf in the refrigerator. When the freezer lettuce has frozen, take it out of the freezer and place it on a plate to let it warm up. Notice how the texture of the lettuce changes as it thaws out. Take the lettuce leaf out of the refrigerator and compare it to the lettuce that came out of the freezer. You might notice that the refrigerator lettuce is still fresh and brightly coloured. The freezer lettuce has probably become mushy and changed colour. When a lettuce leaf freezes, ice crystals damage the lettuce. Like all living things, lettuce is made up of cells. Freezing the water in the cells causes them to break, so the lettuce is mushy when it thaws out. Lettuce doesn't survive being frozen, but some plants are called frost tolerant because they have adaptations that allow them to survive in freezing cold places. Some adaptations include having small leaves and shallow roots and growing close to the ground to provide protection from freezing cold winds. I think that's enough cryogenically cool science for today. Thanks for listening, and remember to stay cool. Stay curious.
The Creative Science for Kids podcast was recorded on the traditional lands of the Bidjigal people. For more information about Creative Science Australia, visit creativescience.com.au.